Welcome to the pod. I'm Jacob.
And I am Jessica.
And what do we do here, Jessica?
We are a TV murder mystery home detective podcast, or we're a TV murder mystery morning quarterback detective podcast.
Monday morning quarterback.
Or Monday morning. What did I say? Oh, yeah. A total spoilers podcast.
Total spoilers podcast. All the spoilers,
Yes.
all the time,
Basically,
right here.
we watch murder mystery procedural TV shows and guess whodunnit after just a few moments. Then we finish watching the show and take score. Who was right? Who was wrong? And who was dead?
Dun dun.
That's a shout out to the scene in The Princess Bride.
Anyways, we're not watching The Princess Bride this week. What are we watching this week?
Today we are watching Waking the Dead, a show that premiered on the BBC in September 4th, 2000.
Ooh.
And it ran until 2011 in the UK for 92 episodes and 9 seasons. And
those Brits and their 10-episode seasons.
Yes.
9 seasons, 92 episodes.
You know, the more we get into this, watching a lot of these British shows,
sure.
And I'm looking at people's backgrounds, I'm finding shows that I found a show that has 1,000 episodes.
Are you kidding me?
1,192
That makes no sense. If you
do
do 1,000 episodes of a British show, that means that British TV show has been around for 100 years. I Cry Shenanigans.
It's probably a soap opera.
Oh, it would have to be, wouldn't it? Yeah.
Crazy. So, this is Waking the Dead is a crime drama. Make no mistake, this is not a lighthearted.
Oh yeah, no. This is.
I mean, it is fun, but it's drama.
Yeah, this is not a comedy murder mystery. This is not a lighthearted. This is absolutely.
Yeah.
It's very similar. It's very similar to CSI in that there's this team. They're led by this grizzled older detective, and they use science and technology to kind of crack the case and do it. They don't do live cases. They only do cold cases.
Yeah.
But I will say this, you'd think, looking at it immediately, that it was a CSI ripoff, but it actually premiered before CSI, but only by a month. So This is one of those shows, clearly there was just a need in the world for, science, forensic, heavy murder mystery shows. Because there was CSI, spawned the whole franchise. This went on for 9 seasons. There was something that just needed to be happening.
Law and Order.
Sometimes that happens.
NCIS. Yeah, it's just in the zeitgeist.
Sometimes we need 2 movies about an asteroid crashing into Earth or a volcano erupting in LA.
Yeah.
That just needs to happen. There's a team led by a gruff older cop that is named Detective Superintendent Peter Boyd. Boyd is gruff, no-nonsense cop. He likes to go with his gut and hunches, and he also, he listens to the science, but he's that guy who's like, I know he's not the murderer. The guy loves to chew scenery. Oh my God. He thinks that scenery is the best tasting thing you've ever put in front of him. He loves to yell at people, get him in the interview room. He'll try and browbeat a confession out of you, do something he doesn't like in an investigation, and he'll castigate you. But it's just because he cares so much. Damn it.
Yes, definitely. So in looking up his background, it was interesting. His breakout role...
Who's the actor? We haven't said the actor.
Oh, I'm sorry. The actor's name is Trevor Eve. And his breakout role was in 1979. He played Jonathan Harker in Dracula, the Laurence Olivier and Frank Langella collaboration. So an interesting thing about him, he has a long career, including, most relevant to me, an episode of Murder, She Wrote.
I love it.
And Death Comes to Pemberley, which is a follow-up to Pride and Prejudice from a couple of years ago, starring, everybody in England, including Matthew Rhys, who is in Perry Mason and from The Americans, the Welsh actor playing a Russian who is undercover as an American. That I don't know why that's funny to me, but it is. I adore him.
It's true.
He plays Mr. Darcy, the most important role. Of Death Comes to Pemberley. But Trevor Eve plays Sir Selwyn Hardcastle, which I don't remember exactly who that is, but it's one of the lead roles.
Sure.
So, back to Trevor. He is currently on so sometimes I'm going to go off on tangents here, Jacob. We're just going to go down the garden path. Trevor Eve is currently on a woman-driven writing and directing staffed show called, there are a couple dudes in there too, but it's basically a lot of woman-identifying people, seems like. And it is called Discovery of Witches. And it has had 3 seasons I think you can find it on Amazon Prime. Anyway, so he's in that. He's in freaking everything. Like, you cannot open a TV show, it seems like, without seeing this guy. There was like a year there where I was like, he's in this too. Anyway, so he's in the show called Discovery of Witches. It's on its third season. Okay, so tell us about the next most important character.
Yeah, so
lead character.
Detective Boyd is assisted by the capable and empathetic Dr. Grace Foley. She's a forensic psychologist. She's a profiler. She's there to say things like, well, if they were traumatized as a child, they might want to go back to the original place of wounding, or something like that.
So
she is misused in this role. She's not misused.
She's not misused.
Really just,
I would argue that she is probably one of the characters that this was created for.
One of the characters, or one of the actors? Or?
Yeah, because she is a mature woman. She's not a young, hot thing. The actress is Sue Johnston. And I enjoy her in a show that in America is called Clatterford. It's a British show.
She's in Clatterford?
She's the lead in Clatterford. And it was in the UK, it was released as Jam in Jerusalem. But I guess they figured Americans wouldn't get that.
Yeah,
So yeah, and Clatterford is created by the famous British comedians French and Saunders.
I didn't know that either. The French and Saunders created Clatterford.
Yes, yeah, and they're both in it as well. It's fantastic.
That is, dear listener, that is one of Jessica's sick day DVDs.
Yeah,
she just likes to hole up in bed and throw that DVD into the player and just watch it.
It's really fun. It's all these mature women. It's a cast of like 10 women and some dudes as well. But it's so many ladies, and they just all have these interesting characters, and they get into these silly circumstances, and it's just really fun.
And it has a great theme song.
So anyway, she also is very famous in Britain, probably, I would assume, for 172 episodes she did on the British soap opera Coronation Street, which is super, super,
yeah, even I
famous.
Recognize Coronation Street.
Yeah. So a very accomplished actress, drama, comedy, and
I would like to strike from the record my comments that she was misused. But it is a little, let's be honest, it's a TV show. They're not really going to do anything very actually psychology based. So.
No. And I guess we'll get to this later, but the creator of the show, Barbara Machen,
we'll go with Machen.
Is currently, and when she creates this, a mature woman writer. She was definitely not like a Dan Harmon, young Turk creating a TV show. And so, I think that, sometimes, not to say that women don't write for men, obviously, Trevor Eve is heading this show, but she wants to have also an older woman represented there. It doesn't need to be just all hot girls, which I think is a tendency in a lot of TV shows. She's kind of like the mom a little bit. She carries a lot of the emotional baggage in the office, I feel like.
Okay, I can see that. I can absolutely see that. So moving on from her, there's another detective. There are two more detectives on the force. So there is the lead detective, Boyd. There is the forensic psychologist, and then there are two more detectives. One of those detectives is Spencer Jordan. He's the only person of color on the main team. He's smart, he's capable, he's overachieving, and he is always getting berated by Detective Boyd. You should have thought of that. Why didn't you do this thing I didn't ask you to do? He's constantly on the wrong foot with Detective Boyd. And honestly, I'm not even sure that he comes around and has some kind of paternal feelings for him or protective feelings for him. He just always seems to be kind of picking on this guy.
Yeah, and I would say he also picks on the other detective.
He picks on everybody.
Yeah, he picks on everybody. Even when a lot of times they go and do things like they take the initiative, and then he's like, well, I didn't ask you to do that. And you're like, but that's that would be the next question.
He hates them taking the initiative. He yells at them if they don't take the initiative, and when they do take the initiative, they've done it wrong. It's a horrible management style.
Yeah, and there are also episodes where so I always feel like this show, there's always in the first act, there's a
Detective Boyd is always throwing a temper tantrum in the first act.
Yeah, and everybody else is kind of like, are you going to be okay? Are you going to be all right, man? Are you going to be okay?
But Detective Jordan, who plays Detective Jordan? Give us the IMDb tidbits.
Yeah, so Will Johnson plays Detective or D.I. Spencer Jordan. Will Johnson has had lots more mystery drama roles, as well as a lead role in a show called Clocking Out, which is about working class people in a town clocking in and out. And recently he was in the fantasy show on Amazon called Carnival Row with Orlando Bloom.
That was a fun one. That was beautiful.
It said he only had one episode. He played Puck. I don't remember. I guess they killed him in the first episode, but it was very meaningful because when I saw that he played that, I was like, oh, that was him. That was amazing. I totally remembered him. Anyway, and then right now he is in the most recent seasons of Outlander. And he was also in a famous run as Othello in 1994 at the Royal Lyceum Theatre. And interesting tidbit that he put into his bio on IMDb, when he was a young actor trying to gig and get roles and, needed a second job, he was working at a funeral parlor and doing a lot of different odd jobs as an undertaker for them.
Interesting.
And he got recognized, and his first autograph was somebody at a funeral.
Oh my Lord. Talk about cognitive dissonance. I really, really hope it wasn't a member of the family, a bereaved family. It's just like, look, I know my father died, but you are kind of famous. Can I get your autograph?
Yeah.
It's bad timing. It's just bad timing. All right. So he is usually partnered with Amelia Silver, also called Mel. She's blonde, she's gritty, and she definitely wants to be as tough as the guys. She likes doing research. I think she does a little more research than Spencer Jordan does. And she gets a little exasperated when she's not taken seriously. And that kind of happens a lot.
Yeah. She's kind of like the little sister of the family.
Yes, she absolutely is.
Claire Goose is her name. Is the actress's name. Her resume includes a ton of crime and mystery drama, including the show Casualty that I mentioned at the beginning. She was also on Holby City, which is, like I said, another hospital show that seems to have spun off of Casualty. And a lot of people... She was very famous for being on that, apparently. I haven't seen it, but in her IMDb bio, it notes that she almost got this really big role on Coronation Street, and she was sad to have not gotten it, but because she didn't get it, she got Holby Street, and that was even better, and it was fine. And the woman who played the role on Coronation Street is just fine.
So is there anything else about the show that we should talk about before we get into this?
We also need to talk about the...
Oh, you're right.
Yeah.
You're right. The last member of the team is their lab scientist, Dr. Frankie Wharton. Frankie is a great lab scientist. She is one nervous tick away from being that doctor who runs crazy experiments in a microwave that somehow always turn out to provide the right clue. But she is always providing the right clue. Like I said, this is a show that digs into the technology and how it can open cases up. So there's lots of DNA testing and ligature marks and all this kind of stuff. And she's a very handy lockpick as well.
Yeah. I saw an episode in which 3 characters that had been exhumed from a shipwreck, when she was working on some different items of evidence, and there was one particular piece of evidence that seemed to be very attached to those 3 dead people, the skeletons that were kind of behind her laid out on tables. But she was working on another piece of evidence, and she suddenly feels, and the camera shows that over the ghosts, the very physical body ghosts are coming up behind her, and she kind of looks over her shoulder and the ghosts disappear, but we all saw them and we know that she felt them. And so she literally takes the piece of evidence that she's working on and she puts it aside and picks up the other piece of evidence and starts working on it because she's like, okay, I think I'm being told
hilarious. Yes.
there is something important about this. So that actress is Holly Aird, A-I-R-D. And
I'll accept that.
She's a child star. She was in a ballet school, and they needed an actor to play a certain role and a little person. Sure, yeah. And they found her and cast her, and then she just took off. Her parents were very supportive. She is delightful
on scene. I mean, I made a joke that she's that quirky doctor, but she does have an effervescence about her, and she's a lot of fun to watch.
Yeah. So So she's been acting since 1980. However, she does leave this show in the 4th season. She took a year off and then went on to a lot of other things, including Casualty, including Grant Chester, and currently she is in The Discovery of Witches with Trevor Eve. So I thought that was funny.
So what else can we tell you about the show? Just a couple more things about the show. One, I'm not sure if we said this, but every story contains 2 different episodes. There's the first half in episode 1, and then it wraps up in episode 2. They're hour-long episodes, and they were shown on consecutive nights. So they it wasn't like a 2-hour movie night. It was like Monday we watched this, Tuesday we watched this.
I like that.
Yeah, it was... I can't decide if I like that better than having to wait a week in between episodes or not. But I definitely like, I'm not a binger. I'm not a binger kind of guy. I like having a little bit of anticipation and a little bit of break between episodes.
Yeah.
That's just me. I'm an old. But there you go. And the sound in this show. They do have a lot of fun with sound in this show. They do not have a problem like layering in other sounds that aren't diegetic. Like if somebody's talking about a beach, they don't have any problem bringing in gulls. And they really love to just punch everything up. Like all the sound effects are a little extra when they want to go into it.
Yeah.
Anyways,
they have to have that.
Anyways, what are we watching tonight? What is the show that we're guessing on?
We are watching season 4, episodes 7 and 8. And the episodes are called Anger Management 1 and Anger Management 2. Yes, the episode logline is: a probation officer is murdered in a halfway house, but is made to look like a suicide.
Ooh.
Yeah. So this is written by John Milne, Andy Hay, who's the director, and Barbara Mashin, who is the creator. And maybe I'll talk about her later.
Fair enough. All right, here we go. Let's dive into this hostel. It's a hostel. Well, that's a way to begin. They are gunshot happy this episode. They are all about repeated gunshots in this scene so far. Like for a show that doesn't like to show guns, they just decided all in. We are gonna hit you with as many. It's not like we went into like a not like we went into like a gunfight at the OK Corral here. But like there were lots of just like repeated firings of a gun in this like dramatic way to show that they were testing a gun and that this was a gun and a murder. And maybe he was murdered this way, bang. Maybe he was murdered this way, bang. Well, if he was lying like this, he would have been murdered like this, bang. Or maybe he shot himself, bang.
Well, there's a lot of extra motifs in this.
Oh yeah, they're definitely. This is definitely their Emmy episode. Like they are definitely going for like we are going for high TV art on this episode. There are so many intercuttings between like they start in medias res. So like they start at this point where the Detective Boyd is
that Latin?
In medias res, in the middle of things. Uh-huh. Yes. They start with Detective Boyd leading this person out of a car, and the person is this man. He's got like longish gray hair, and he's got his hands in handcuffs, and as they're walking under a bridge, they go to this dimly lit nighttime scene. By the way, it's a tree in the middle of nowhere, but of course there's this like white light coming from somewhere illuminating the side of everything, which is anyways.
It's probably from the freeway above.
Sure. Okay. Yeah. We'll say it's from the freeway. Whatever. In any event, it was super self-conscious, dramatic lighting. So Detective Boyd leads this guy to this clearing. The guy, meanwhile, tricks Detective Boyd into going over somewhere. He picks up a gun, shoots, and we are meant to think that he has just shot and killed Detective Boyd. And that is the opening to the show. Yeah. So clearly, this guy with the white hair is the bad guy. That is what you're supposed to think right there. Oh my gosh. And maybe he is, and maybe none of these guesses will mean a thing.
Yeah.
Well, we're still going to do it.
Because so it starts in the middle of things, but it's a flashback. Because then it says...
it's not a flashback.
Yes, it is. It says this was 2 weeks earlier.
So the gunshot is contemporary time. Then it says 2 weeks earlier, so the rest of what we're seeing is a flashback. The gunshot to start it is not a flashback. Well,
I think him in therapy is
Oh, yeah, it's totally a flashback.
It's
absolutely.
After.
You think it's after all this?
Yeah.
Okay, so to explain to people who don't know what's going on, is that So after they start in the medias res, they go to this flashback, and they're looking at a crime scene, and then they're back at the forensic lab, and intercut with all of this, very hard cuts, is Detective Boyd at a therapist's office.
And they keep showing sky scenes of clouds.
Yes.
When he's
talking
to the therapist, who is in like a 10th floor building on a clear day in London. One would suppose.
So it's a flashback within a flashback.
Yeah.
It's great. And even within those flashbacks, there's hard cuts between camera angles and what he's saying. So like it's very like disassociative and like schizophrenic, where it's just like, I'll say this, and then I'll say this, and then I'll say this, and then all the
clouds
cuts
and
change.
Gunshots and clouds and gunshots.
And then there's like whole sorts of like camera porn as the detective like gently takes apart this gun, but meanwhile they're investigating the scene. Okay, what's the plot? We got to get to the plot before
we'll get to that later. We just have to guess right now.
Well, no, I know, but you have to know who we're guessing and what we're guessing about. So someone was killed or committed suicide in a hostel.
Which a halfway house is commonly in our
we would think of it as a halfway house.
Because it's not a hostel for vacationers.
Right, which I completely thought. I completely thought it was a hostel for vacationers, but it's not. It's for people who are on probation. This is their temporary housing where they have to go to. Someone was found dead there. The police originally ruled it a suicide. Detective Boyd and Frankie don't think that it was a suicide, so they have to decide, was this a suicide? Was it murder? If it was murder, who did it? Meanwhile, Detective Boyd's in therapy and quoting Shakespeare Midsummer Night's Dream, and he's trying to be in a good mood. And the guy who shoots Detective Boyd in the opener, he's a resident at the halfway house, and he has the happiest prison scene in the world. Like, literally, this is like the happiest prison scene outside of Shawshank Redemption, where he's teaching a black man in the prison to play flamenco guitar, and then he goes home to his loving family who's super happy to see him. And there's one more character that you meet who is another mentally disturbed person at the halfway house, who was in the halfway house because he strangled the guy who, quote unquote, interfered with his sister.
Which was a big LOL for me, because I think in another episode we discussed the word interfered.
Yes.
And I was like, it's such a British euphemism. But the actress, or Claire Goose, who plays Mel's actually says to the guy, interfered? What do you mean by interfered? And I was like, oh, really? You're going to ask?
Interfered with her private parts, I think, was his reply.
His reply. And we were all like, yeah, I know. We all got that.
So there you go. So that's who we have so far. We have the guy with white hair, whose name is Sam. We have the guy who was dead, whose name is Don. Oh, no. The guy who's dead is named Tim. And we have the guy who found Tim dead and is a little mentally challenged, and that is Don. And Don also obviously stays at the hostel. So all we have are two suspects right now, but we had to stop. We were 25 minutes in. We couldn't wait for any more suspects. This is what we know. We've got to come up with some guesses.
We have one other important thing that we have to mention.
Yes.
The reason why Frankie had been at the site as the coroner,
right.
But the detective on site that morning was like, it's a suicide, pack it up, everybody's done here.
Right.
But she was pissed because she was like, they got me up early to do this, and I'm not sure that it is a suicide. But then the police got the gun back, and the gun has the same bullet residue marks as these two other undetermined, what's the term?
Unsolved
cases from the
two
past.
Two contract killings from the 70s and the 80s.
And the numbers have
Serial
all
numbers
been
on the gun,
filed off, so you can't really say that the gun, but because the bullets
right.
match. So they're like, is this guy who's dead, was he the killer of the other two people? Because the other thing is that this guy has a totally squeaky clean army record.
The victim is totally squeaky clean.
We don't even know why he's in the halfway house, honestly.
He's the probationary officer.
Oh,
he was there because he was the officer in charge, probationary officer.
Yes, okay. So, yeah, he has this totally squeaky clean image, and yet he is dead. And with this gun that has been in these
linked to these other two contract killings.
Correct.
Yes.
So the choice is, did he actually kill himself? And how did he come across this gun?
Right.
And then if he was killed, or did he feel guilty and that's why he killed himself?
Right.
Or did somebody else kill him because he had killed these other two people as related to the gun?
Right.
So, yeah, these three
Or why was he killed to begin with? What is he involved with that is
yeah,
bad?
because the suicide, the placement of the gun, because it was like right up against the head, just like the other two murders, it would be like him stretching to the back of his head to kill himself instead.
Yeah.
So sorry for all the gruesome.
No, but that's important because
mysteries,
yes,
and I'm sorry for making jokes about interfered with. It's not actually funny. It's just a euphemism. So
the euphemism is funny. The
Yeah.
act is not funny.
No,
the
that is
euphemism is funny. So there's two choices here. Either Sam, so Sam's the guy with the white hair who in the opening shoots Boyd. So our options are clearly he did it and he's the bad guy and he's trying to kill Detective Boyd and there will be some sort of turnaround, which hopefully I'll get to, that Boyd lives because, duh, of course he lives. Or alternately, he's not the bad guy, but he is somehow forced into shooting Detective Boyd. If he's not the bad guy, who is the bad guy and who wants him dead? Who wants to kill such an amazing flamenco guitarist? Because we meet Sam and he's playing his flamenco guitar, which he learned in Marrakesh. Did he learn it in Marrakesh or was he going to Marrakesh and he found Granada?
yeah, that's what he said.
Yeah, he was going to Marrakesh, found Granada. Anyways, he's also very lefty and punk. He gives his guitar, so he's practicing flamenco guitar with this black man in prison and ends up gives the man in prison the guitar as he's leaving, and the guy's like, I can't take it from you, and he's like, property is theft. So, he's a great big radical lefty.
Yeah, his wife is also a professor or teacher,
Yes, some professor out of college,
students, and she has very hippie earrings.
Oh, I didn't notice the hippie earrings.
I mean, they're earrings, but I think that they would have been like Professor Hippie earrings.
Professor Hippie, I have a question.
For the costume designer, they would have been.
Right.
Looking at these earrings, I was like, oh yeah, I totally know those earrings. In fact, we were watching another episode the other night, and I was like, oh yeah, I remember those earrings too.
Okay, so he's clearly involved with something. Is he the bad guy? Honestly, anytime you can make an ex-hippie, pretentious, flamenco-playing, middle-aged white guy a murderer, I'm down for that. I am all for that. I am there for you. Please, yes. But I don't think he is the ultimate bad guy in this. I do think he is just involved with this somehow. So, why does he end up trying to kill Detective Boyd, and who is trying to kill him? I think he ends up trying to kill Detective Boyd because his family is in danger. I think his family's in danger. I think someone's trying to kill him, and this is his only way out. I think he was a drug mule. I think that's what happened when he was going to Marrakesh or Granada. I think he was a drug mule. It's not Ireland, so I don't think he was running guns. I think it had more to do with drugs, especially, he's a musician, traveling the world, the aforementioned hippie nature. So yeah, I think he was a drug mule. I don't know why that means he's connected to those murders. Do we even know why he was in prison in the first place? There was a weird flashback of him beating somebody.
With a pipe.
Yeah, with a pipe, but we're not sure what that's about.
Somebody in his neighborhood.
Yeah. Looked like like someone who lived across the street or something like that.
Somebody was a very straight
and
man with a polo shirt on.
Yes. And the theme of this episode is that Boyd, this is hilarious, because Boyd is one of his good mood episodes. He's trying to be positive, and in the therapy session, you find out that the therapist is all like, do you always wake up thinking the world is a horrible place? Do you always wake up, blah, blah, blah. So this is all about, maybe having hope that the world is not such a horrible place all the time. So I think he's going to be ultimately absolved. But there are going to be some bad people involved, and people are going to be threatening his family. I'm going to say he had some drugs hidden in his guitars. When he has these lessons, he's actually selling drugs or passing along where to get drugs. So I think there's going to be somebody's going to come out who, through one of his students, he's running drugs, and somehow he's going around and he owes these people millions of pounds because property is theft. So maybe he just didn't think about the money and he took the money and used it someplace else. and got the drug people angry at him, and he's kind of been on the run a little bit ever since. And in that case, prison was maybe the safest place for him and his family. But now that he's out, the men want their money. They're coming after him and his family. He's got to figure out how to protect him. He gets himself into a pickle. And I wonder if the shooting of Boyd wasn't staged just so they could get him deeper undercover and find out who's actually behind it. So I'm going to say somebody we haven't met yet is behind it all, and he is some kind of drug kingpin. I'm going to name him Druggy McDruggerson. Yeah. That's my guess. Druggy McDruggerson.
Shoot, you were going to say somebody. Okay, yeah. I also was thinking along the lines of not as met yet, Druggy McDruggerson.
Oh yeah, no, it's absolutely somebody we haven't met yet, because we've only met 2 people, and I don't believe either of them are actually the villain of this episode.
Yeah, I also wonder if it might be a woman.
Ooh.
I think I bet there's a woman here somehow.
Okay.
Or maybe because his therapy is probably about his son, right? And how the world is a miserable place.
Maybe.
So
yeah, I can
maybe
see that.
there's also a son. A young son
who's... like some kid that he had somewhere else that he...
Well, it's something familial. You know what? That's it. It is something familial because he has a daughter who loves him. Sam has a daughter who loves him. The detective has a son who is dead, and that makes him very sad. And the young man who discovered the dead body, he was defending the honor of his sister.
Yeah.
So I think this is somehow about familial loyalty, and not just loyalty, but protection, and being able to care for family in some way or another. I'm just going to say out of the blue, I wonder if it's a woman that we haven't met yet. I'm wondering if there might be another woman involved.
Okay, so I think those are good instincts. And because the other thing about this is there's a moment in the opening where Boyd mentions... he quotes from Midsummer Night's Dream. He quotes Puck from Midsummer Night's Dream. Something in the speech at the end about slumber and dreaming. It's not the whole "you did but slumber here when these visions did appear," but it's around that speech, and it's about sleep and dreaming. So, what in the very pilot episode of this series, they definitely do a hard take on Hamlet, where they twist that around. So I'm wondering how we can twist around Midsummer Night's Dream.
Well, I mean, if you go with Titania, a son that was taken from her.
Ooh.
Or a fight of a father and a mother over a changeling.
And also, for that matter, lots of just, I've got this drug I'll put in your eyes and make you fall in love with somebody.
Yes.
Make you fall asleep and make you fall in love with somebody, the first person you see. So...
Mm-hmm.
So I think that goes deeper into the Druggy McDruggerson theory of mine, but there's something happening there.
Even though my heart wants to believe he's somehow tied up in it, this dead body that we've met at the beginning of this episode, the
probation officer.
The probation officer. My heart wants to think he's somehow involved in this, but I think he was an accident.
Sure.
I don't think he was supposed to be killed. I think it was supposed to be somebody else, and I think he has nothing to do with this, actually.
Yeah, he's a red herring.
Total red herring. And, well, let's just call the woman Titania. That there's a Titania that's going to show up at some point later in the episode, and I think that it's something motivated in keeping a family secret quiet.
Okay, and I'm going with Oberon, who just wants to give the drugs to Puck and everybody else.
Yeah.
In Midsummer Night's Dream, does Oberon give the drugs to Puck, or does Puck have the drugs? And he says, I know what'll be funny.
No, Oberon tells him to go find the special flower.
Yep.
And he goes and does it.
Yeah.
And then he tells him where to put it, but then Puck fucks it up.
Yeah. So you're going for Titania. I'm going for Oberon.
Yes.
Here we go.
Okay.
Hello! Welcome back! Oh my god, 2 hours later and so many gunshot sounds. Oh my god. Sound editor, you were in love with the gunshots. Kabang, kabang, kabang. All the time. That's my takeaway from this. Many gunshots. Jessica, your takeaway.
We kind of left the therapy behind at a certain point.
We did.
Did we even have that in the second episode
I was
all?
thinking the same thing. I don't think we did. I think that it was just one of those things they put in the first one and they did. They let it all go for the second one. First, I have to say, more than anything, I am not disappointed in the therapy. What I am disappointed in, I am disappointed in myself and my half-assed knowledge of Shakespeare. I hear a quote about a dream and I'm like, it's Midsummer Night Dream. No, my friends. The quote we heard was not from Midsummer Night Dream. That was not the thing. We were led down the primrose path of Midsummer Night Dream, and we got our quotes wrong. It wasn't from that. It was from The Tempest. It was the quote.
We weren't led. We took ourselves.
Well, yeah, okay, fine. We took ourselves. We absolutely said, hey, we know a little bit about Shakespeare. Let's go to Midsummer Night Dreamland. Yes. So we did, and we should have gone on an island vacation to The Tempest. So the quote is, all our revels now are ended. These are actors, as I foretold you. We're all spirits and are melted into air, into thin air. And, like the baseless fabric of this vision, the cloud-capped towers, which might explain the clouds around all the therapy in first episode.
As I said, they were on the 10th floor of a building with very beautiful, clear view.
The cloud-capped towers, the gorgeous palaces, the solemn temples, the great globe itself, yea, all which it inherit, shall dissolve. And like this insubstantial pageant faded, leave not a rack behind. We are such stuff as dreams are made on, and our little life is rounded with a sleep. Thank you very much, Mr. Shakespeare in The Tempest. Thank you very much, Waking the Dead. I suppose I should actually thank my high school Shakespeare teachers who are shaking their head in frustration at me right now.
How do you think I feel? I was in A Midsummer Night's Dream and I didn't go I don't think that's right. And I worked for a Shakespeare company and I wasn't I think we should look that up before we go.
Before we make We make guesses without clues. We make Shakespeare guesses without context. We're just going for it. We're just there. You go.
Who is right? Who is wrong?
And who misquotes Shakespeare?
Yes.
All right. Well, having put that aside, here we go. Here is a recap of the rest of the episode. By the way, I am not going to get into the weeds on this. This was 2 hours of twists and turns and red herrings and pollen and all sorts of craziness. I'm not even going to get into the pollen, because it's just not important. So here's we go. So we were right that more people were going to be introduced. Two more key people were introduced. One person named Mark Andrews, who was an old cellmate of Sam's, came back into Sam's life, and he came to visit him at the hostel. And the other person, so his DNA was there, and so he was brought in as someone who was a person of interest. In flashbacks, we saw that they did know each other. And Mark, guess what? Mark works for a guy named Phil Brown. Phil Brown is a kind of, he's a developer, business developer in town. Phil Brown is this guy, rich city developer, shady side.
He's super shady.
Shady.
He's basically, he's not mafia. He's just a bad man.
He's a bad man. He's not
protecting anybody. He's just doing bad deals.
He's doing bad things, protecting his own moneyed interests, and luring rent boys and other 17-year-old boys into his web of deceit and corruption. And yes, that included Sam way back in the day. So
Sam again, white-haired man,
hippie.
Plays the flamenco guitar.
Right.
And
at the very beginning of this episode, points a gun at Detective Boyd and presumably shoots Detective Boyd.
Yes.
So that's where we start. That's where we'll end. We'll get there anyways. As soon as Sam gets out of jail, Phil comes and threatens him essentially and says, "You still work for me." Sam says, "I retired." Phil's like, you'll retire when grass grows between your teeth. And I'm going to maybe, I've got to threaten your family. So we got that right. Like, the family was going to be threatened and somehow brought into all this.
But there was no woman.
There was no woman, and there was definitely no drugs. All this running around the world, drug running stuff, nothing to do with anything.
I mean, don't get me wrong. They all took drugs.
Yes, there were many drugs that were taken, but he was not a courier.
Yes.
He was, in fact, the hitman. We know he was a bad person in the past. We just didn't know how bad. We learned that he beat a man near to death, which is why he was put into prison. But we also know that he's trying to be better. It's almost as if he's two different people trying to reconcile them. How will he do this? Well, he does this by framing himself. So Mark Andrews was paid to kill Sam. When Sam tried to retire, Phil got angry. He paid Mark to kill Sam. Well, turns out Mark has bad vision and didn't recognize that the person he was shooting wasn't Sam, it was Tim. That is how this whole murder started happening.
So we were right. It was an accidental murder.
It was an accidental murder. And so the police go and find Mark, round up Mark. Mark says, sure, he killed Tim, but he didn't kill Phil. And maybe why don't you ask Sam? So they go and they round up Sam. And the last 20 minutes of the episode is just Sam sitting in a cell confessing to everything. He has been trying to find absolution, and he thinks that by confessing all these things, he will have found absolution in the eyes of the law. Now that he also has absolution, he'd been talking to a rabbi and getting absolution from the rabbi. So police round up Sam. Sam confesses. Sam even planted a fingernail at the scene of the crime to make sure that he would get called in so that he wouldn't chicken out of confessing. But he wanted absolution. He promises to take Boyd to where he buried the gun, which is how he kind of kept his two lives separate. When he had the gun, he was a bad man who killed people. When he didn't have the gun, he was just a flamenco playing guitar.
And he puts on a disguise whenever he does his hitman
becomes
thing.
Someone else. So anyways, he takes Boyd to where the gun is, except he tricks Boyd. He picks up the gun. He shoots. We are meant to think that he shoots Boyd. He really shoots himself. Now he's dead. He is asleep. His play is ended. And Boyd wanders around being like, why did he do that? Why did he do that? Except for the fact that we just spent the last 20 minutes talking about absolution and wanting to get clear of things. So, Boyd, I don't know what you're thinking. In any event, there you go. He was in fact the hitman. It was all about how he got there, why he got there, and the fact that he wasn't going to actually kill Boyd. He was going to kill himself. I don't think either of us get any points for this.
No, I agree.
Yeah, that's
100%. 100%. Egg.
Yeah. Wah, wah, sad trombone.
Yes.
But okay, I do want to talk about this before we move on to what I am told is some scandalous knowledge about this show. But before we move in on that, like I said, it was the last 20 minutes of the show was this confession. And Jessica was not bored by this at all. And I have to say, I don't know that I was bored by it either. I don't think I was bored in this whole 20 minutes. I was definitely engaged. But I was also like, really? 20 whole minutes of just explaining how things worked and what happened? Talk to me about why you weren't bored with this.
I was enraptured by his monologue of how he got started with. It really felt like I was just sitting there listening to some dude tell his story. Very well edited, I might add.
Monologue with gunshots.
Asking and people asking him questions along the way. So not a monologue exactly.
Yeah.
But yeah, he was chosen as a rent boy, and he just got completely wrapped up in the life of the sex, drugs, and music.
And revolution.
So
the whole property is theft thing. He was an old lefty, and he was kind of drawn into this whole being a hitman through the allure of making the world a better place. And
which is kind of that 60s, 70s Charles Manson
absolutely.
kind of idea.
Revolution starts now.
And Phil Brown told him that he was murdering he was being a hitman, taking care of people who deserved it. They were somehow bad to the cause. We don't really know how Phil thought they were bad for the cause, or
that's never
what
explained,
cause Phil was even in, because in the end Phil was just a very rich man with somebody doing his errands and a secretary and a beautiful house in the countryside. So very odd in that regard. And that's, I think, what really, one of the things that really wakes Sam is, well, it actually has nothing to do with the money, but he does wake up and realize, oh, I'm not doing this for revolution. I'm doing this because he's using me, and he just wants me to get rid of people that are inconvenient to him. And so that I guess that story of a personal awakening, it justifies the first moments or some of the first moments in the script in the first episode, where he comes home from curfew, and he isn't lying about that. When he is interviewed by the police, he says, I had just come home for, to curfew. And then they're like, well, why did it take you 9 minutes to call? And he was like, I was trying to get the guy to calm down, because the guy that the young man on probation living in the halfway house who found the dead probation officer was flipping out. And so it was true that he did have compassion for that young man, and was trying to get him to calm down and try to figure out some solutions so that he did not have, even though he was holding the gun, and he because he was kind of a little bit of a dunce, and he had picked up the gun, he was trying to help him out, and he was being very calm about it, and he was like, we'll just make it look like a suicide, wipe your hands off your all of that was motivated in a truly compassionate, higher feeling of trying to take care of this young man.
Didn't need this person didn't need to be stained like he was stained. I think was one of the lines.
Yeah. And then it also, explained why he broke down crying when they were having Sabbath. He and his wife and his daughter, they were having Sabbath together. And then why he did finally open up and have all these conversations with the rabbi. Like, all of these stories were suddenly, I don't know, it just felt earned.
They did a good job. Like starting with the killing at the beginning and then looping back to 2 weeks earlier. Again, it's one of the oldest tricks ever. And I'm just like, I did not have high hopes, my friends. I was like, okay, fine, do this. But they leaned into it. They did it really well. I like this. This was good. Even though I didn't get any points. Points them. Oh my gosh. We're 0-2, people. We're 0-2. This does not bode well. Oh, I need a victory. I also need scandal. She has picked up the phone, looking at notes. Hit me with the scandal.
Okay. This scandal involves the West End show called Women in Black, which you saw.
Which I did see, which is phenomenal.
You jumped into another man's lap, or like the two of you held hands or something, because you were both so scared.
It is a ridiculously scary show, people. Oh my God, I loved it. I know why it's been running forever. 2 thumbs up. Cannot recommend highly enough. It will scare you. If you like scary things, go.
Yeah. So... it's been running forever.
And it literally gave me nightmares.
Oh my God,
It legit gave me nightmares. I am also a scaredy cat, but it is a really good show.
I was seeing One Man, Two Governors down the street, and you were like, ah! At Woman in Black. I wish I had seen it. So this involves Woman in Black. It involves Shakespeare. And it involves the Great British Bake Off.
What?
These 3 things.
Great British Bake Off?
Yes.
Oh,
okay.
I am here for you. Please, let me get my popcorn.
Okay. Sometime in 2011, 2013, the UK entertainment papers were scandalized when it was reported that show creator... This is after this show had finished, by the way. Waking the Dead finished in 2011. So it was reported that Barbara Machen,
the creator of the show,
age 65,
wow,
had a new girlfriend in 73-year-old mystery author Susan Hill, who wrote The Woman in Black, the famous West End play and film starring Daniel Radcliffe, who had reportedly just left her husband of 38 years, Shakespearean scholar Professor Stanley Wells, and moved into Barbara's place in Norfolk. But in 2016,
3 years later,
gossips were bowled over when Barbara Maschen was reported to have left Susan Hill for lefty activist and comedian Rhonda Cameron, 50 years old, who was once accused of outing her famous former partner, who was the presenter Sue Perkins of the Great British Bake Off, who was not openly gay at the time. Cameron and Maschen were reported to have been introduced at the London Screenwriters Festival, and there's some other details. But Susan Hill, a woman in black, left her Shakespeare professor husband for Barbara Maschen. Fell in love with her because they met when the two of them...
When Barbara Maschen jumped out of her chair and into her lap at its performance of The Woman in Black.
Right. Susan Hill has a series, I can't pronounce it, Serrailler. They're crime novels.
Sure.
And Barbara Maschen was going to adapt it into a film for Susan. And Susan fell completely with no knowledge of herself being bi or a lesbian or anything.
And was in her 70s.
And fell in love with this movie adapter who was in her 60s. Barbara Maschen. So she left her husband.
And then just 3 years later?
Was left by Barbara for another woman who was 50 years old.
Yeah.
So that's why I was saying about Sue Johnston in this show. Like, Barbara is standing up for all the ladies of age in the country.
Yeah,
like,
I can see that now.
We are not dead. Just because we may have already had children and have grandchildren does not mean that we are not still having sex and falling in love and moving in with each other. Or, I mean, I don't mean we. I just mean, ladies are...
Is there something you want to tell me, Jessica?
No, I have nothing to tell you. What I'm saying is that, we are not dead. Ladies are not... I don't know. There's just this idea in America...
once you're over 30, once you're a mother, once you... you
have no other roles.
Yeah.
I mean, I went to an improv comedy thing, and literally, it wasn't even just auditioning meant I could only ever have mother roles. It was like I was standing in a comedy room, and every single character I walked into, the other kids in the room were like, "Mom, Mom, blah 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 blah," and I was like, "Oh my God, what the fuck? You can't even just think of me as another woman in the room? I'm your mother. The end." Anyway.
Oh.
So, yeah.
Come on, improvers, do better.
Another crazy thing about the woman that Barbara Maschen left Susan Hill for, when Barbara Maschen met Rhonda Cameron in 2016 and left Susan Hill, by the time that Rhonda Cameron had met Barbara Maschen, she was 50 years old, and she was with another woman, a 38-year-old school teacher, who was pregnant.
Wow. You left your pregnant partner to go with Barbara.
Yes, and the entertainment papers found it necessary to point out that in Rhonda Cameron's Edinburgh play, because all comedians go to Edinburgh, that she had said that she had a very promiscuous past. And so I was like, you saw fit to point this out.
May I just say, Barbara Maschen, let me doff my cap to you. Girl, you got game.
Yes, she really does.
Game, girl. Well done.
She must be some sort of magic person, because she was like, she wove Susan Hill and was just like, come and look at me. And then 3 years later, Rhonda Cameron, ooh.
Barbara, we'd love to have you on the pod. All right. Are there any more scandals?
I don't know. I mean, I can
It's Barbara Maschin. Of course there's scandals.
Yeah, I mean, there must be some history of her, like her, what's it called again in D&D when you...
Her charisma score.
Her charisma score must be like
through the roof.
off through the roof. It must be like rolled,
natural
30.
D20. Yeah, she's
natural D20 plus
18 plus she's got all sorts of stacking modifiers.
Plus
It's just
10. Yeah.
Well, hopefully we will get some stacking modifiers the next time it's time for us to guess, because we are not doing so good right now. So what are we doing next time?
Well, by Siri, we are going to be doing Grimm.
Grimm. All right. That sounds like a fun show. Lots of fairy tale murders to look into.
Yes.
All right. I'm Jacob.
I'm Jessica.
See you next time.
It's a meta game that they were
Right.
playing, that they were like, oh, they were so distracted by the fact that she didn't get killed off that they forgot to realize that the importance to the story.
That's an interesting point.
Yeah.
I can see that, yeah.
Yeah, so, writers are fun.